Have you ever thought about this? If every country is in debt, who are we actually paying? The United States is $38 trillion in debt. Japan, $9 trillion. So who is receiving this money? Every country on Earth is in debt. The United States carries over $38 trillion in debt, the highest level in its history. The entire European Union holds around $14 trillion. Japan has nearly $9 trillion. Even oil-rich Saudi Arabia and China carry massive debts. But look at this paradox. If everyone is in debt, who exactly is the debt owed to? To find the answer, we need to understand how the modern world actually works. Because debt isn't just a burden, it is the architecture of the modern world. Every war, every crisis, every economic boom and collapse has been built on these invisible debts. So who are the creditors? When you follow the chain far enough, you discover something unsettling. The world isn't really in debt to someone else. It's in debt to itself. But that doesn't mean everyone benefits equally. How did we get here? We now live on a planet with over $315 trillion in total debt, 3 times the size of the global economy. To understand how this began, we have to go back centuries. The idea of national debt didn't start with credit cards or digital transfers. It was born in war. In 1694, England was at war with France, and its gold reserves were gone. The king turned to merchants for help and made them an offer. Finance the royal treasury in exchange for a permanent stream of interest, backed by future tax revenue. To manage this system, the Bank of England was created. This was revolutionary. For the first time, a state could spend money it didn't yet have, and the lenders received something priceless, a promise from the government. A promise that could be bought, sold, and traded. This is how government bonds were born. The core of the modern financial system. France copied it. The Netherlands refined it. The newly independent United States adopted it to finance its revolution and later its westward expansion. National debt was no longer a sign of failure. It became a measure of credibility. To borrow meant to govern. Empires once conquered land and mined gold. Now they issue bonds and extract interest. The battlefield became the balance sheet. So who owes whom today? 3 centuries later, debt has become the world's largest export. The US owes $38 trillion. Japan owes $9 trillion. Global debt grows by $1 trillion every 100 days. Every country is in debt. Every bank lends. Every citizen, through taxes, savings, and pensions, is both a debtor and a creditor. So, who's really holding the strings? Let's start with the United States, because its debt isn't just national, it's global. Roughly half of the $38 trillion is publicly held, owed not to government agencies, but to investors. About 2/3 of those investors are American: banks, pension funds, investment funds, insurance companies, and the Federal Reserve itself. The remaining third, about $9 trillion, is held by other countries. Japan is the largest foreign holder at about $1 trillion. China holds around $800 billion. Then come the UK, Luxembourg, and Belgium. So when people say America is in debt to China, it's technically true. But it represents only about 2% of total U.S. debt. Most of America's debt is owed to America. The Treasury issues bonds. Banks and funds buy them. The Federal Reserve buys many of them back, creating new dollars in the process. Now listen carefully, this is critical. Americans pay taxes. Those taxes pay bond interest. That interest flows into American retirement accounts. It's a circular mirror. The debt is real. But the creditor is a reflection of the same system. Is this just an American phenomenon? No. This loop is global. Japan lends to the U.S. by buying treasury bonds. The U.S. lends to Europe through the IMF. Europe lends to developing nations via the World Bank. Developing countries hold their reserves in Western bonds, feeding the cycle back. It's a planetary game of hot potato. The only difference: the potato is made of promises. Every country holds another country's IOU. Every promise is backed by another promise. It's like a poker table where everyone borrowed chips from the next player. The only rule keeping the game alive: no one stands up. So who actually controls the system? The markets. Behind every government bond is a massive network: hedge funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks. They manage trillions of dollars. They are the real referees. They decide which countries can borrow cheaply, and which must pay punishing interest just to survive. When their confidence disappears, currencies collapse, governments fall, and entire economies are restructured overnight. Democracy decides who governs. Markets decide who survives. And the modern high priest of this system is the central bank. Here's the crucial point. Central banks don't just manage debt. They create it. Every time the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank buys government bonds, it creates new money in exchange. One balance sheet's liability becomes another's asset. Every dollar in circulation represents debt somewhere else. There's no such thing as debt-free money. Every coin, every banknote, every digital dollar carries an invisible IOU. For decades, this loop has survived on trust. As long as investors believe governments will pay interest, even if they never repay the principal, the machine keeps running. But what happens when trust breaks? We've seen it. In 2010, Greece became unable to service its debt. Bondholders panicked. Interest rates exploded. The ECB and IMF stepped in. But the bailout came with austerity, higher taxes, spending cuts, mass unemployment. For an entire generation, rescue became synonymous with sacrifice. Argentina turned repeated defaults into a national curse. Sri Lanka ran out of foreign currency to service its debt, triggering fuel shortages and political collapse. When the system breaks, the creditors suddenly become visible. The IMF, credit rating agencies, faceless bondholders tightening the noose. But here's the strange part. Even after collapse, the logic restarts. New loans replace old ones. Debts are restructured. The machine resumes with the same balance sheet logic. Because in the 21st century, debt is not designed to be repaid. It's designed to be rolled over forever. Now listen closely. Have you ever wondered whether governments actually plan to repay their debt? No. Not now. Not ever. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's policy. This is how the system works. When you or I take out a loan, we're expected to repay the principal. Governments work differently. They treat debt like a subscription, constantly renewed. They issue new bonds to pay off old ones. Economists call this refinancing. The real product is interest, rent paid for stability. The global economy now depends on this rent, like a shark that must keep swimming to breathe. The U.S. will never repay its $38 trillion debt. It will roll it over forever. Japan has done this for decades. Its debt to GDP ratio exceeds 250%, yet interest rates remain near zero. Do investors expect repayment? No. They expect renewal. Why? Because government debt is considered the safest collateral on earth. A U.S. Treasury bond isn't a liability, it's an asset. The foundation of global markets. Pension funds hold it. Banks use it as collateral. Central banks treat it as money. The system depends on governments never paying off their debt, because if they did, the world would lose its most trusted financial instrument. Imagine this for a moment. Washington decides to repay all its debt. Banks and funds worldwide would instantly lose their most stable assets. Dollar supply would collapse. Deflation and economic breakdown would follow. Paying the debt would destroy what keeps the economy running. That's why governments do the opposite. They issue more debt. Not recklessly, but rhythmically. Debt is the heartbeat of capitalism. It flows through every pension fund, every mortgage, every market on earth. So when politicians say we'll balance the budget or pay down the national debt, they're selling an illusion. The goal isn't to eliminate debt, it's to keep it sustainable, serviceable, and attractive. So the system never stops believing. Because once belief is gone, numbers lose meaning. Trust collapses, interest rates spike, and an economy built entirely on promises grinds to a halt. This is the true secret of sovereign debt. The plan was never repayment. The plan was to make the world believe it would be repaid. Is this system fair when we say we owe ourselves? No. Interest payments aren't distributed equally. They flow upward, from taxpayers and workers to institutions and investors who hold the debt. Debt isn't just a transfer between countries, it's a transfer between classes. That's why global inequality rises alongside global indebtedness. The system rewards those who hold debt, and punishes those who only pay it. If this sounds familiar, it's because it's the same story told at different scales, from households to nations, from nations to the planet. Creditors aren't villains. Debtors aren't victims. They're two sides of the same engine. So, when does the problem begin? When the engine runs out of fuel. When new borrowing can't keep up with old promises. That's when the question, who is the creditor, stops being abstract and becomes personal. Because at the top of this global pyramid, there's no single face to blame. Not China, not Wall Street, not the IMF, all of them. And us. Conclusion: debt has become money. The modern financial system has turned debt into currency. Governments issue it. Banks multiply it. Investors trade it. Citizens depend on it. The line between debtor and creditor has dissolved. Debt once meant slavery. Today it means balance. But what happens when that balance breaks? When trust disappears? Then the illusion ends. And we remember, debt is a promise that cannot be held forever. So the real question is this: will we wait until the system collapses? Or will we begin changing the rules of the game? This is where we pause and think, stay enlightened,